Blinx was one of those games I saw at the store all the time. I never had an Xbox when I was a kid, but I always wanted to play it, and in making my previous video, that's something I finally got to do. But here it is, they made a sequel, Blinx 2 Masters of Time and Space. I used to hear people talk about Blinx all the time, but I never hear anybody talk about Blinx 2. I didn't even know it existed until just recently. I actually quite liked the first game, even though it did have a number of issues, but with a sequel comes many opportunity to fix what you did wrong, so let's see how this one does. Once again being developed by Artoon Studios, Naoto Oshima returns to the helm to direct the project. The first game was a pretty big deal when it came out. Hey, check it out, Xbox is a mascot too now, the first 4D game ever. Blinx 2 had a similar marketing with its initial announcement. Articles online dating all the way back to 2004 explain that it was announced as the first 5D game ever. Yeah, 5D, because this time you're not just controlling time, but also space. But it seems that kind of bragging slogan didn't make it to the packaging this time, where it's simply advertised as an action game where you get to play both sides of the story, the good and the bad. Uh-oh, a platformer game where you play both the good and bad sides of the story. Now doesn't that sound familiar? Digging even deeper, I couldn't find anything else regarding the game's marketing. To me, it kinda looks like it simply had a quiet release. I mean, at the time, of course, Microsoft was advertising the hell out of Halo 2, which released only a week before Blinx 2. I think I just found out why nobody talks about this game. Because nobody remembers it. People that owned an Xbox at the time were into this, not this. So when this comes out only 1 week prior to this, it's not going to sell. And that is a crying shame, because believe me, I've played Halo 1 for the original Xbox, and while I don't think Blinx would have been as impressive or groundbreaking at the time, it easily holds up better than Halo. Halo 1, not Halo 2, Halo 1. It definitely holds up better than Halo 1. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Why don't we actually pop in the game, try it out, and see if it's any good. The game begins with a cutscene featuring Benito and his gang of Tom-Toms looking deep underground for treasure.
We've never stolen anything like this before.
Oh, dang, I guess there's voice acting this time. I'm gonna be honest, I'm really gonna miss the cute gibberish with subtitles, but whatever. The Tom-Toms stumble upon a gigantic time crystal, and despite his gang warning him not to, Benito jumps and grabs the crystal, but causes it to shatter into fragments that scatter across the world. The energy of the crystal renders him unconscious while his gang rushes him out of there. You'll spend the rest of the game trying to recollect the fragments of the crystal so you can reassemble it. Wait, that sounds an awful lot like, Then we find ourselves customizing a character? Okay, the character creation is pretty in-depth. You can completely reshape every aspect of it. Why does it let you do this? Why does it let you do this? I played half of the game with a completely deformed character, and I mean, why not? The game lets you do it, so of course I'm gonna do it. Now we gotta name him, so Freaky Gusto. that always works. When we actually get to start playing the game, it's a fairly lengthy tutorial sequence that really babies you through all of the game mechanics. The first game did tutorials just fine. It stuck you in the first level, and a notice would pop up every now and then telling you what each thing is about. I mean, dang, dude, this is just excessive. This definitely is not a good way to start a game. Just drop me in the first level already. I can figure most of this stuff out myself, and if not, just tell me as I go along. I don't need a freaking class on how to do every single action before you let me go out in the field. It's like when you're 9 years old and your mom's telling you to behave before she lets you go outdoors. It's not something you want to sit through. One thing I did get a good kick out of, though, is that a laugh track will play every time you mess up, as if they're like, look at this idiot, he can't even beat the tutorial. There's a lot of improvements on the moveset. You can now lock onto enemies, making combat so much smoother. You'll still have to aim yourself at them to fire in their direction, which is kind of annoying, but it makes keeping track of the enemies so much easier. They also got rid of that useless, awful backflip thing that kept killing me in the first game. Big points for that one. Everything just feels faster. You run a bit faster, you can sweep things up faster, it all feels streamlined, and it improves the game feel dramatically. There's also these dumb segments where it just has to spoof the Matrix. You know, time will slow down, you'll have to dodge the bullets. These segments are nothing but eye candy, and they come out of nowhere and serve no other purpose than being a useless QuickTime event. But anyway, once we're finally done that tutorial stage, we get another cutscene. I like that all the cats don't look the same anymore. The production value here has easily gone way up. With the big crystal destroyed, time itself starts to become unstable, and if that wasn't bad enough, the Tom Tom gang busts into the time factory and start attacking. The cutscenes feel so much more cheesy than they did in the first game, like it's trying so hard to be cool. Blinx even gets a scar in his face for no good reason other than the fact that scars are cool.
Yeah!
After the mother computer goes down, a mysterious image appears on the monitors with a message in an ancient language. The sweeper chief realizes something must have happened to the big crystal and sends Blinx to go restore it. Blinx runs over to the portal, but this time he's not alone. He's accompanied by an army of sweepers. This is a group effort, and they're going to need every bit of help they can get tracking down the crystal fragments. Again, it looks like it's going to be a very story-driven game, and this time it actually is. There's plenty of cutscenes all throughout the game, and while the voice acting is pretty bad,
Calm down, guys.
I think it does a solid job of telling a simple kid story.
Please, boss, wake up!
What? That dream was just getting good.
Sorry, boss, but the time factory is under attack.
What?
It's cheesy, but I kinda liked it. Now we finally get to play the first level, and that's not Blinx. I'm the guy that I made. You don't play as Blinx in this game, not throughout the entire game. He only has cameos throughout the story. I mean, I like the idea of making your own character and being part of this large-scale army on this big expedition, but playing the game without the titular character at the wheel is just plain weird. This time your objective isn't to beat all the time monsters, but you're now instead given a mission to fulfill. It could be to collect a certain item, or pull a switch, or find something. You're often given more than one mission at once, and you can do either or to advance. I like this. Neither one really has any benefit over the other. You can just do whichever one you personally feel like doing. It adds a level of freedom and openness that Blinx 1 didn't quite have. Every level consists of usually about 3 missions that you'll have to play through without any saving in between, which I wasn't really a fan of because look how long these levels took me to complete. If you're going to play Blinx 2, make sure there isn't something you're going to have to do later that day because you can't save and quit midway through. The time powers still come into play, but they don't have quite as a dominant role as they did in Blinx 1. In fact, you only start the game with pause and rewind. You don't get to use the other powers until later in the game when you unlock them. They all work exactly the same way as in the first game, except fast forward, which now increases your momentum, making you jump further. That's great because that was the one I never used and now it's actually helpful. The time monsters now only exist to give you time crystals when defeated. There's also no longer any crystal combos, like straight up collecting 3 of the same color crystal regardless of order will give you a time power. This means you can now just mindlessly grab everything you see without having to think about it. Because of this, it's extremely easy to stock up on many of every time power. You'll never come across a situation where you don't have what you need. It almost feels a bit too easy. A lot of the strategy in this game is pretty much gone. It's more of an action game than a puzzle game this time. I mean, the time puzzles are still there, they're just very rudimentary. It's no longer a case of figuring out how to manipulate your general surroundings, but rather a series of specific objects that you know a certain time power matches to. For example, these switches. You need to pause time so you can move all the water off of them, but now every time you see this kind of switch, you know just to use the pause. It's just a series of devices that match a time power rather than a situation that requires thought and planning. It also really doesn't help that they literally call you and tell you how to do every single puzzle. I'm not joking, the game will stop, you'll get a call, and they'll tell you exactly what to do. This is pretty much what kills the game for me. How often it's interrupted by these radio calls. I mean, if the text box appears without pausing the game, it'd probably be fine, but it's so invasive and stops me every couple of minutes. A lot of times it's not even helpful, but just useless dialogue like, good job. But even when it is helpful, it's just solving the puzzles for me. You weren't gonna, let me think about it for myself at least once? There's some periods in the game where you'll have to use 2 time powers at once, like using record and slow at the same time, slowing down time where you also get to record yourself. But while it sounds like that should open a world of possibilities, it's very under-implemented and ends up being restricted to areas where the solution is either obvious or straight up told to you. The tutorials become pretty excessive even after the first level. Between each stage, you'll have to do another one of these before they let you enter the next level, and it's always explaining some very basic, easy to understand mechanic that I certainly didn't need a 5-minute lesson to wrap my head around. Maybe people complain that Blinx 1 was too hard, but even then the game's mechanics are easy enough to understand and even easier to make your way through each level already. Babying us through the rules is not a way to make the game any more accessible. Making the time powers easier to get, improving the controls, and making the puzzles simpler, that already made the game easier. Almost a bit too easy, honestly. I even checked to make sure I wasn't playing on an easy mode, and I wasn't. The difficulty does default to easy, but the first thing I did before starting the game was changing it to normal, and I really didn't see any results. But if you can get past the relentless tutorials and the lack of challenge, there is a fun game here. Navigating the courses is still a good time, and I feel the element of exploration is a lot more present here than it was in Blinx 1. But the biggest change here is the ability to play as the Tom-Toms. Between levels, it'll switch back and forth between the campaigns. You do have the option to switch back and forth between whichever team at any time, but it's pretty much pointless because the later levels don't unlock until you've done whichever levels the game wants you to first. I feel it could have benefited from a little more freedom of choice when you switch back and forth, maybe straight up making them two separate campaigns like Sonic Adventure 2 did. However, switching between these two styles of gameplay so frequently does keep the game refreshing. The Tom-Toms play so much differently than the sweepers. Stealth is the name of the game here. You'll have to sneak past the sweepers and try to get to the goods before they do. Yeah, the sweepers aren't the only ones looking for the time crystal fragments. The Tom-Toms are too. The Tom-Tom story follows after Benito has a dream of a girl named Mina who calls out to him asking for help. It turns out that they can save her if they recollect the crystal fragments and put them all together. Making contact with the Great Crystal knocked Benito right out, making him have this dream. It also turns out that whoever touches the crystal will have their dreams become a reality, which is why apparitions of the Tom-Toms invaded the Time Factory, because Benito had a dream about it.
Hello.
Stupidly enough, Benito falls madly in love with Mina, and it's actually really funny to see what he'll go through to try and rescue her.
This is exactly what she looks like. Send this to the search team immediately.
It is adorably stupid, and I cannot help but to love it. I really like how the Tom-Toms interact with one another, the way they're so disorganized and crude. It's a nice contrast to the super serious and very organized sweeper teams with their professional spec ops talk.
Stay sharp, and we'll all make it through.
Now, instead of the sweeper's time powers, the Tom-Toms have powers that manipulate space instead, and that'll help you advance through each level undetected. I feel the Tom-Tom powers have a structural freedom that more closely resembles that of Blinx 1. Here the items are again scarce. You won't be given everything all willy-nilly. You'll have to work with what you're given, but you can also go out of your way to purchase specific powers from the shop to help you get through a level if you so please. The Tom-Toms have a bunch of items, way more than there are time powers. The first is a decoy. They're pretty common. It'll create a distraction occupying the sweeper's attention so you can sneak on by. There's also a banana peel that you can make the sweeper slip on, incapacitating them. Time grenades that'll briefly pause time, as the name suggests, hypercloaks that'll make you temporarily invisible, a space bubble that'll trap the sweepers in a force field, amongst many others. My favorite of the bunch is the warp tunnel. You'll throw a grenade far away that'll open up a small wormhole and you'll teleport over to it. Instead of using sweepers, the Tom-Toms can use a variety of guns. Oh yeah, believe me, I was thinking the same thing too when I first heard about this, but it's more so goofy little laser guns, nothing terribly edgy. You can also get a baseball bat that'll knock someone out in a single hit if you can sneak up on them. Now, as far as stealth games go, obviously I've played better. It's a company dabbling in a field that you can tell they're not really experienced in. The mechanics are a tad clunky, but so long as you're clever and careful, sneaking past the sweepers can be pretty fun. I don't really like how getting caught works, though. It'll set off the alarm, spawning a bunch of sweepers that'll come and kill you in a matter of seconds. Like, you seriously won't even stand a chance. In fact, you can hardly stand a chance against just one. Their accuracy is deadly. But if you get caught when you're in a high-up area or quickly go around a corner, they come kinda just forget about you in a matter of seconds. This is easily abused by popping off a shot, getting caught, waiting for them to give up, rinse and repeat until you've taken out all the guards. It's a pretty easy exploit if you've got the patience for it. The Tom-Tom levels share the same structure as the sweepers. You'll get 3 or more missions, each one consisting of a different objective, and sometimes there's multiple and you can do whichever ones you want. More often than not, you'll end up having to retrieve some sort of loot and bringing it back to the starting point. This is probably the most tedious part of the Tom-Tom levels. You can't double jump while carrying it, and you can't use any items either. You'll have to keep dropping it, dealing with the guards, picking it back up, and slowly making your way back to that starting point. It is kinda cool though, devising a path backwards through the level, having to now get something back to point A. Returning is the shop where you can purchase new weapons and upgrades. A big problem I had with Blinx 1 is how scarce it was with giving you gold. That is no longer a problem. The gold income to price ratio is much more forgiving here. But more importantly, if you buy a sweeper, you have it. You can switch to it whenever you want by equipping it to your team from the locker room. That's one of the things I complained about in Blinx 1, and it's good to see that they fixed it in this game. Everything you buy goes to the locker room, where you can completely customize your character at any time throughout the game. Though this time I find the different sweepers are not as helpful. The fire sweeper doesn't really do a whole lot, so I just kinda stuck with the highest level basic sweeper that I could get at the time. You can also buy upgrades for them, increasing the amount of trash it can hold, but unlike Blinx 1, it'll be assigned to the sweeper itself instead of you as a character. Every level of sweeper has a specific one it's compatible with, and they're not that much more expensive than the sweepers themselves, so you'll probably just end up buying them together whenever you get the chance to upgrade your gear. I can already imagine what the Amazon page would look like. Boss battles make a return, and now they're a total joke. They're super easy, minimal strategy involved. You pretty much just shoot them until they're dead. Sometimes you gotta use a time power and then shoot them until they're dead. I mean, like, there's a tiny bit of puzzle aspect sometimes, but they are a breeze, especially compared to the first game's bosses, which were super tough. Sometimes you'll have to fight the other gang, though. These ones are a little bit tougher considering how quickly the other team can deplete your health, but they're still not very hard to get by. In fact, it again reminds me of Sonic Adventure 2. You know how you'd have the big, actual, large-scale boss fights, but every now and then you'd run into somebody from the opposite campaign and have to fight them too. There's no way they didn't take inspiration from this game, but I mean, at least they're doing it in a fairly reasonable way and none like Tai 3. Presentation-wise, this game feels a lot different than Blinx 1. Blinx's design is a lot thinner and leaner. He's not as cute as he was before. They were really pushing the cool factor this time around, even making his sweeper look like a guitar. It is nice to see the character still sporting that big smile, though. I forgot to mention this in a previous video, but it's clearly inspired by the Cheshire Cat. There was only one frame of animation between facial expressions in the first game, making it appear sudden and kinda jarring. Here they've added an actual animation that transitions between facial expressions. A nice touch if I do say myself. Some people have told me that they find the face kinda creepy, which I think is total nonsense. I mean, come on, how could you not love it? Just look at that big ol' smile.
Just look at that big ol' smile.
The graphics still look nice though, albeit there is way too much bloom in some stages. It's kind of overwhelming on the eyes sometimes. The music's still pretty good. Doesn't feel as time-themed as it did in the first game, but there's a number of jammin' tunes I like. I really like the music for the Tom-Tom stages. It has that greasy undercover vibe to it. Though I really don't like the new designs of the time monsters. Instead of looking like bizarre, weird time anomalies, they now look like demons from hell. What happened here? The final boss is the worst contender of this. It looks like something out of Diablo, not Blinx. The final boss has the Time Sweepers and the Tom-Toms teaming up to fight a common evil and combine their crystals to achieve a common goal. Again, just like Sonic Adventure. The final boss really isn't that hard. I mean, the game overall really isn't that difficult. It definitely doesn't hold a candle to how challenging the first game was. Whether that's for better or for worse, I guess is up to the person playing. Personally, I did enjoy a smoother ride through the game, but I couldn't help but to miss the challenge and the satisfaction of overcoming all these obstacles. And I guess that's Blinx too. Oh wait, there's multiplayer. Okay, let's check this out. First off, there's a versus mode where you and up to 3 friends can duke it out in the arena. It's not very good, you just try and kill each other. It's probably about as good as Donkey Kong 64's multiplayer. But hey, there's also a co-op mode for the campaign. Here, 2 players can work together to complete each level, and man, it is really fun. It's not like the most clever or well put together co-op I've ever experienced, but hey, it's a co-op platformer. And that's something I've been wanting to play my entire life. How many other co-op platformers exist? I find it works best for the Tom-Tom levels. Being a stealth game, there's so much more in the realm of possibility when it comes to teamwork and taking out the guards. If you want a really good time, grab a buddy and play through Blinx 2 on 2-player co-op. It is a blast, believe me. I can easily say I had way more fun playing this game on 2-player co-op than I did playing the single player. In the end, Blinx 2 is a very different game than Blinx 1. Not that it doesn't feel like a sequel, I mean, it feels like a sequel. They expand on many of the ideas that made Blinx 1 what it was in the first place, but it also includes things so new and different that it feels pretty distant from the charm of the original game. I'd be pretty hard-pressed to call this game a puzzle platformer like I'd call the first title. At heart, it's very much an action game, a much easier one than its predecessor at that. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Each game has an appeal that the other one doesn't really have. I guess if you're looking for a charming and challenging experience, you should probably stick with Blinx the Time Sweeper. But for those looking for something less difficult, more action-focused, or maybe something solid in the genre that actually has 2-player co-op, then Blinx 2 is definitely the better option for you. Personally, I think I like the first game better. There was a charm to it, and a level of satisfaction you get for beating every level and boss that just isn't quite there in Blinx 2. But that's not to say I don't like this game. I mean, there's a lot of things here that aren't in Blinx 1 that I really like. The improved control scheme, the customizable characters, and the ability to play as a Tom-Tom gang. It's a lot of fun. But the problem is, you're gonna have to get by all of those nasty tutorials if you want to enjoy any of that. You know, it's a shame they couldn't fix the problems of the first game without creating even more. And I mean, the thing is, they're not even problems that would have been that hard to fix. You just gotta ease up on the tutorials a little bit. That's all they had to do. If only they made a third game where they could have fixed that. I mean, I'd love to see a Blinx 3. Come on, Microsoft, you know you guys have it in you. Get Artoon Studios back in the game and create a third title. Unfortunately, that's never going to happen because back in January of 2015, just last year, Microsoft officially abandoned the Blinx trademark. That means no more Blinx games. Not now, not soon, not ever. I find it really dumb that every article I found reporting this just has to point out that, oh, that's okay because Blinx was really bad, remember? That game was a piece of garbage. As if they don't know anything about the game and just saw that 72% on game rankings and assumed the game was garbage, as if like a 10-year-old review average still means anything today. I mean, look at GoldenEye's review average. Do you think that seriously holds any ground today? That game hasn't aged very well, but a game can age well just as easily as a game can age poorly, and Blinx is an example of a game that has aged well. As sad as it is to say, we will never see another Blinx game. And that's a shame, because I think they had a pretty decent thing going with the first two. I mean, they weren't the best platformers in the world, especially compared to the likes of Mario and such, but they were really unique and they were charming, but at the very least, they were fun. And in a world that we currently live in that's very scarce of 3D platformers, a return to the Blinx series would have been a lot more refreshing than Halo 4, 5, and 6. Wait a minute, that just sounds like Pumpkin Hill. You ready?